Hello. Hello. I feel like now I have to say that every time. Otherwise, I feel like I'm going to get jinxed or something. But hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Eat Predators Daily. I'm your host, Alexa Nikolas. I guess let's digest. How is everyone doing? I don't expect anyone doing that well, to be quite honest with you. It's October 17th, 3:36 p.m. How is everyone doing? It's a lot. I've been spending most of my days either crying in the bathroom before I hop into the shower, because obviously I don't want my kids to necessarily see me crying all the time. But I'm sure that we all have our own safe spaces to cry or mourn or grieve over the last 10 days. I think, are we in day 11 or day 10? I'm not even sure at this point. These lives should become my therapy sessions. Christian. Hi, Christian. Hi, Jacob. God, yeah. I mean, that's what I first want to say is going into this is obviously I want to always make sure that I emphasize that this needs to be a safe space for everybody where we can collectively come together, even in disagreement, and treat each other with human dignity and respect and have faith, or at least some type of hope that together we are better. Together is honestly the only choice we really have, I think, at this point. And I just want to make sure that this is always a space where we're able to have very, very tough and hard conversations that sometimes comes along with extreme triggers. And we can allow our triggers to happen, but never at the expense of dehumanizing another human being. So going into this conversation, that is definitely where I, draw the line, is that it's very important for us to create a safe space. And we also have to acknowledge our privilege, or our privileges, in the sense where we're able to create a safe space to have these conversations, right? We have to acknowledge and check our privilege at the door, and also allow others to check our privilege when it seems necessary, and not to be defensive about our privileges, but instead acknowledge our privileges, right? And, we came out of COVID in 2020. That was honestly the beginning of COVID. And we saw so much, or at least I thought we saw a lot of individuals acknowledging their privileges and recognizing it and trying to be, or checking it. Honestly, I thought I saw so many individuals checking their privilege at the door, or at least starting to. And indoctrination privileges, for example, take a lot of self-work. You have to be dedicated and devoted to reprogramming yourself in a lot of ways, educating yourself, and it's a lot of responsibility. And what comes with it is a lot of recognition of how we have, without our knowledge sometimes, been complicit to things that we would never, ever, ever allow if we were fully aware of what was actually taking place and all the dynamics of what was taking place. And it's just very sad, because now we're here on October 17th, witnessing horrific tragedies. And we are seeing so many individuals that would rather argue with one another and dehumanize one another and disconnect from one another than just having a conversation with one another and sharing their grief and their mourning and maybe their imperfect perspective. And I think it's really important as human beings that we allow to have an imperfect perspective on things and be vulnerable with that imperfection and allow others to maybe guide us towards the truth and maybe not fight it. We can question it. I think it's actually very important that anything that's being brought to you is questioned and there is a conversation that takes place. But we have to allow the vulnerability of imperfection. And I think coming from obviously a celebrity, I was almost going to say celebrity lineage. That's how fucking gross it is. But, coming from a person that considers themselves or others consider them as a public figure, it's taught to us to not, it's taught to us to be constantly perfect. And, one of the main reasons why I started, the ePredators YouTube channel was to be vulnerable here and to share my humanness. And as you guys have all witnessed, I go through triggers. Sometimes I get extremely angry. Sometimes I'm crying. But this is part of being human. And there is no perfect human. That's just not going to exist. And the more that we encourage each other, that we can all create safe spaces for our imperfections. And we encourage, instead of shaming others, to come to a more humane, heartfelt, and rational place. And it's all about encouragement. And shame never works, right? I feel like as a parent, I'm having to learn that and it's hard. Sometimes, Nova screaming on the top of her lungs and it's hard. And I'm trying to read an article about what's happening in Israel and Palestine, and you have all the triggers that are happening and you have to ground yourself into a place where you're able to reflect encouragement to be better or to understand the space that you're in than to shame them to get there. And I feel that the shame game has been used for so many years. Humans have used the shame game for so many years. And I really don't feel that it has helped much. I think shame causes too many insecurities, and therefore people do not want to be vulnerable about their imperfections, and they don't feel safe to confide in someone about what they're thinking about. And, there's a lot of different pages that talk about cancel culture that they think that's what encouraged even more so that. And I have some, this is not a time for a debate, but I understand that, we have to make sure that, I like to say this over and over again, but cancel culture is not about cancel culture. It's about not financially rewarding someone who abuse, others, right? But we don't want to cancel people from existence when they are confused or they are triggered or they don't understand what's actually happening. Instead, is it okay? Misled. Yeah, that's actually the proper word. Misled. We want to get them there. And how do we get them there? I don't want to use the whole new age good vibes only because I'm actually not really for that per se. But we do need to show them that we care. And we actually care about them getting there for the collective, right? It's not about getting them there for our own personal gain. It's about getting them there for the collective. And it's our collective responsibility. And I know today we're talking about, can a politician be a predator? And, to think about a politician, we have all collectively handed over our responsibilities to a very few individuals, right? And there's a lot of responsibilities that come along with us handing over our trust, our responsibility to a very few. And sometimes those individuals can misrepresent what we are about. And we end up paying the price for a lot of it. And honestly, I feel like that's when a predator gets in that position, they thrive off of that because it creates a divide between the civilians. It creates a divide between the people. And I'm sorry, Alexa, you should say Noam Chomsky. First of all, Irish Republic Media. I love Noam Chomsky. I've been reading Noam Chomsky since I was 16 years old. I read Manufacturing Consent when I was 16 years old, and I love Noam Chomsky. Also, I really enjoyed a lot of Howard Zinn's writings as well. So I'm right there with you. Richard, my favorite part of my week. You're so sweet. Yeah, and so when we hand over our responsibilities and our trust to a very few individuals, we can start to get conditioned by them. And it really stems back to, if we are survivors of SA, we can really empathize with that, right? We can really empathize with that. We give our trust and our love to maybe a partner, right? That ends up disrespecting and abusing our trust. And we can get conditioned, like Jaden said here, we can get conditioned by the things that they say. And when we end up coming forward, we have to deal with the victim blaming that comes along with it. And I would really like to at least draw some type of dot to the fact that civilians get put into that same scenario where the victim blaming begins. And, oh, you elected this individual into a position of power and, yada, 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 yada. And it really, we have to be very careful of victim blaming, because victim blaming has the same tropes, to be quite honest with you. And it usually comes with trust. A group of people or an individual ends up trusting a few or one specific individual to carry out the morals and ethics of us as a collective. And like I like to say this maybe too many times, and you guys might get annoyed at me, at one point, but I do want to say that predators will see that as a weakness. What we see as strength, our morals and our ethics, they will find a weakness in that, and they will exploit that. And they will find ways to justify harm and crimes that we didn't sign up for necessarily. And they can and will prey on our fear. And predators can sniff out fear. That's what they look for. They look for fear. And wherever they find the fear, they know what to exploit. And politicians, if they are someone that is a predator or has predatory inclinations, then they will use the fear of others to exploit that. And they will do it ruthlessly. And it's kind of almost like the opposite of a therapist, right? A politician can actually find all the triggers of the collective and push all of those buttons. They know exactly which button to press, and it can create a collective that is willing to do anything out of their fear. Out of their fear. What is the chat saying? I think you're spot on. Not thank you. I hope I'm not annoying. I know I keep saying these things, but it's like very important to continue to say this, because it takes a lot, even for me as a survivor, you know, to deprogram myself, honestly, and to understand predatory behavior. And another thing to note is that institutions that make a lot of money off of predators and a lot of money off of hate and fear will use predators. Like, they're kind of like the main predator on the top, right? So they'll use the little tiny predators beneath them to fulfill their agenda. And so that's what I also had to learn, was first realizing my own individual predator, and then understand the institutions that were protecting my predator. And there's always an institution protecting the predator. There's always an institution that's allowing this predator to gain more and more power. And what happens is the collective that want to hand over their responsibility, because imagine doing a 9-to-5 job and having to do, you know, all of the work of politicians, right? We can't fathom it. And that's what capitalism wants. They want us so busy with our 9-to-5 that we don't have the time to to engage in the things that actually matter. And so, you know, not only is the 9-to-5 creating psychological havoc and insecurity and poverty, but it is also creating a distraction so that we are continually in a cycle of handing over our responsibilities and our trust to a selected few. And what comes with that is a lot of responsibility in itself, because when the person or the collected, you know, the maybe multiple people that we hand it over to do something that is against what we personally want or our ethical code, we can get defensive. We already have enough stress in our lives, right? Just being a civilian. Being a civilian comes with a lot of stress, and we're constantly fighting for our life, to be quite honest, to stay afloat. And so we can feel extremely responsible and defensive when the person that we gave our responsibilities and our trust to steps out of line. And we see this again and again and again and again throughout history. But we're definitely seeing that right now. And one of the main tactics of a predator is dividing and conquering. It's a simple, people kind of like downplay it because it's so over, like we've heard it so many times that we don't even think it's real anymore. It's like Santa Claus, where we're like, yeah, Santa Claus, blah, blah, blah. Divide and conquer works every time. It just does. The more that we can create division, that ends up cutting off the chances of us coming together and finding a solution. Right? Because the only solution is going to be us coming together. That's it. And predators know that. Predators definitely understand that. And so even the ones that we think aren't really that predatory, like, you know, they're not really a predator, they're counting on the division, okay? They're counting on the division time and time again. They want us arguing with one another. They want us fighting with one another. They want us creating wars with our words, while wars that are physical are happening away from us. They count on it. Because sadly, what ends up happening is we become the enablers. And that's why, you know, sometimes I have to even back off on, you know, maybe being so upset with enablers. Because when you understand politics a little bit more and more, you realize how easy it is to fall into an enabler blueprint. And Sadly, it's more common and easier than we would like to admit. It's sadly too easy to fall into a enabler mold. But now that we have the internet, we're able to see a lot more information, but what comes with that is a lot more misinformation. And so we're having to sift through so many different, so much information, and we don't have sometimes the best compass to know what is true, what is not true. But what I want to remind everyone is the most important compass is your moral compass. And predators want us to forget our moral compass. What makes us human, what makes us compassionate, what makes us empathetic, and if we can't be empathetic, then sympathetic. That is our human compass. And what makes you weep over watching someone be brutally taken from this planet, that is and should be your only compass. And anyone that is trying to take you away from that compass is not on the side of humanity. And I know I spoke earlier about Corey Feldman, and we talked about the person who was abused becoming the abuser. And throughout history, it is a cycle of that, right? It's a cycle of that. Is a cycle of trauma, a cycle of violence. It's over and over again, and it becomes a cycle of revenge. And I know a lot of survivors have maybe even thought, maybe once or twice, of their predator, experiencing maybe the same pains that they experienced, right? The thought of it is extremely different than acting it out, right? So we can have the thought of it, but we must hold our human dignity in place and know that we don't want to act that out, because that is the cycle of war. That is the cycle of war. That is the cycle of abuse, and that is the cycle of trauma. And it never excuses. I'm not saying that when someone has been traumatized before, that excuses them being abusive towards others. And though at the same time, we have to acknowledge the cycles of abuse, the cycles of trauma, the cycles of war, the tit for tat, of human lives. But it never justifies it. It's never going to justify it. That's not how we're going to put an end to this. Because once we revenge, then we are only waiting for what comes next. And what comes next is usually an atrocity, a war crime, something so horrific we can't even look at it. We can't even look at what we've done, right? Because it was first so personal. It starts with something so personal, and we think it's so personal because of being triggered and traumatized. And then it turns into something that the collective has to experience. And once we see that, it's hard. It's extremely hard, and it's never justified. It can never be justified. And that's why when I'm seeing so many messages in my DMs of people wanting to make this extremely personal, we have to be very careful about personal. And it's not because personal doesn't matter. No. Personal does matter. And you deserve justice for things that have happened to you personally or your family member. You deserve the justice, right? But when others have to suffer outside of the personal, it becomes detrimental. And it becomes horrific. And it becomes something that humanity really cannot look away from. And we should not look away. We cannot afford to look away because these are human lives that are at stake here, that are dying by the thousands, and we can't afford to look away, especially when you're an American, because our tax dollars are going towards this. And even though we find it okay to hand over our responsibilities and our trust during an election, and we are fine with acknowledging that we put in the ballot and, the little I voted stickers, we got to also acknowledge the I'm complicit stickers that really should be on our shirts and jackets, right? And it doesn't make you a horrible human being. And you don't need to be defensive. You only need to acknowledge how your trust and your responsibilities ended up in the wrong hands. And it's honestly, it's not your direct personal fault. But we must acknowledge how we are complicit in things. And if we can't do that, I like to say predators need enablers. They need people enabling their behavior. And acknowledging how we are enabling, we don't have to take it personal. We can acknowledge that we're imperfect. We can acknowledge that I don't have time for X, Y, and Z, and so I voted in, I handed over my trust and my responsibilities to a selected few. Admit it. Be vulnerable. We must create safe spaces to admit our imperfections. It is the only way to get out of this. It is truly the only way for us to get out of this. It is. We must admit that we're imperfect. We must admit that the people that we put into power don't necessarily represent our morals and our ethics. We must admit it. I know that I want to say it's simple, and I know that it comes along with a lot of triggers, and it comes along with a lot of pain and recognition. But in 2020, we must admit our privileges. So therefore, we must admit also the ways in which we enable specific people to create crimes, war crimes, and kill and hurt civilians, innocent civilians. And you can have a debate. You can sit there and go, this person's this person's that. That is the division at place. And that is coming from a lineage of trauma that has every right to be triggered, every right to want justice, every right. That doesn't take it away. But at the same time, we must understand when it gets out of hand. And when it becomes strictly just to harm or to get back. And what do we get back from losing human life? What do we get back? What do we get back from losing human life? We get back nothing. We get back nothing but shame, despair, sorrow, PTSD. For lineage, for your entire lineage, that will carry out that shame. We don't want to be here anymore. I know we don't, deep down. We don't want to be here anymore. We don't. But a lot of what happens, we think we're coming from a place that's creating justice and, making the wrongs right. And it's just not the way. And I'm seeing so many different messages from individuals that are trying to justify human lives lost. There is no justification for human lives lost. Civilians. There isn't. You can try and go into the history book and pull out the pages, but that's not going to erase the PTSD that those individuals are suffering from and what the next generation is going to suffer from as well. And we are handing over trauma over and over again. And that's what puts these predators into a position of power, is our trauma and our fear, and us not having the time because of fucking capitalism to actually be responsible for the things that we just don't have time for because of capitalism. And it's a never-ending fucking cycle that we're going to be in. A never-ending fucking cycle. And it's not, I'm not saying here's the blame. The only blame is the predator. The only blame is the person who's exploiting individuals who are caught into the trap of capitalism because there's no fucking way out. If you try to escape capitalism, which is just a total gaslighting situation, you try to escape it, you can't live. You might be homeless. You disengage from capitalism, you're out of here, right? And so we're all stuck in this. And because of that, and just because of cultures and societies in general, we get trapped into the day-to-day. We don't want to hold all of the responsibilities that comes along with being a human. And so we hand it over to a powerful entity, which is usually the government. And we have to definitely check ourselves when we see the people that we're handing this over to start acting outside of our ethical code. Outside of our ethical code. That's when it becomes a serious problem. And then, though, at the same time, fuck, I got to go to my 9-to-5 job, right? Oh, I recognize this, but I don't really have time for that. And it's purposeful. It's absolutely purposeful. It is what it is. And so we're trapped in this. And now we're fighting with one another over our entrapment. That's what I find so, it breaks my heart that we are fighting with one another over our entrapments. Instead of acknowledging the entrapment and wanting to see a fellow human being and going, I feel your pain. And I don't want you to be in pain. This is not about revenge. This is not about this and that. This is about human life here and now. And if we're going to sign a contract that human lives now have to hold the crimes of their ancestors for eternity violently, we're not going to get to a place of solution. We're just not. We're not. And it's not to erase what someone's lineage has done, but we must allow the opportunity to get each and every person to come along and accept the responsibility of their ancestors. But I don't think it's going to happen in this cycle of violence and this cycle of war anymore. I think this is something that predators thrive off of, and I think this is predatory behavior. And it's in a constant state of dividing one another, pitting each other against one another, literally getting families to divide. I see Jewish family members calling each other anti-Semitic. I mean, what's happening? And when you get families to divide, I mean, not to compare this in a way that, downplays any of this, but it's very similar to Scientology in the sense where David Miscavige and L. Ron Hubbard would use the fact that if someone was not in Scientology, then they would make them disconnect. And what comes along with disconnection is the outside world can no longer, the conversation can't happen anymore. A non-bias, not that I actually support completely non-bias, but you can't have a conversation with another human being about what's happening. And you can't get opinions or advice from somebody outside of what you're in. And we need unity now more than ever. We might disagree about a lot of fucking stuff and things that we hold very dear. and things that are very important to us. And those are real. But we must never lose sight of our humanity, because humanity is what brings us together. That's what creates the unity. And I like to say over and over again, the only thing that's going to protect us is the numbers and numbers of people, survivors of systems that have betrayed us, right? Survivors of each and every single person's system that has betrayed us. There's a lot more of us than them. It's a selected few. And they know that. They know that. And so I know I'm just going on and on. This is like, some people might find this whatever. I understand. I'm going on and on. It's important to me. But when I've been reading about, Israel, for example, currently and right now, and looking at Palestine, I started to think about how a politician can sometimes remind me of a cult leader. And the only person that taught me a lot about cult leader tactics was a politician. And I realized that the other day. I went, wow, the person that taught me all about cult leader tactics was a politician. And why is that? I know why that is, because it's extremely similar. It's extremely similar. And what do we call our society? A culture. A culture, right? And who ends up really defining that culture is usually the person we put in position of power. They end up getting all the spotlight of what the culture actually is and yada, 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 even if it doesn't fully represent the collective, right? They're the ones who is stating what the culture is, the do's and the don'ts, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I was thinking about that, then I couldn't help but think about the fact that a lot of politicians use religion, right? They use religion as a way to justify the things that they're doing. And there's a danger to that, because that could be a predator who's preying on religious texts. And it's not to say that the religious text is necessarily bad, right? Some of it's very good in the sense where it's trying to get before law religion, right? And they're trying to get people to a place where they're respecting their neighbor, and the list goes on. The list goes on and on and on and on. But a predator will use religion to justify their criminal acts. And we, as either citizens or religious folk, need to make sure that we're never allowing a very small selected few individuals to exploit our moral compass, rather it be religious or secular, secular. Doesn't matter. No one should ever exploit our collective moral compass. And I do have faith in humanity. I think that's the only way I can keep going. I mean, not maybe faith, but optimism. And I know deep down a lot of people do not want to participate in genocide. They don't want to participate in the brutal killings of children. They don't. But they're afraid to admit that they're complicit. And we must admit to our faults, even if they're faults that we are not fully aware of or didn't know that we were getting into, where we were manipulated into it, sometimes coerced. But if we don't admit the fact that we're imperfect, we're never going to get the fuck out of here. And I really do believe that colonialism perpetuates this idea of perfection. I mean, women experience it all the time. Let me fucking tell you, as a woman, you got to look like this. You got to be a size this. You got to be, it comes from colonialism. And there's so much pressure to be perfect all the fucking damn time. And we're not. We're not. And actually, that's where our humanity is. That's where we can actually relate with one another. Doesn't matter if you're, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Where our humanity is in our imperfections. And if we can't recognize and admit to our imperfections, we won't be able to connect with one another, because we're constantly going to be trying to find the faults in each person and shame them out of them. No, it's not going to work. We have to decide, are we perfect or are we imperfect? And when is it okay for us to reveal that? And to feel safe to do that? And are we collectively together allowing a safe space to admit to our imperfections? No, because of our own insecurities around our imperfections. And we're trying to write everyone out. Like, oh, no, I know more than you. You're an idiot. Listen, it's not going to work. It's violent communication. It's what the predator wants. It divides us. And therefore, we're never going to win the long fight. We're not going to win as a people. We're not. Because we can't even stand as a people. We can't even stand as a people. So it's never going to happen. As long as we constantly berate one another and pick out every imperfection, we are imperfect. It's a truth of being a human being. We must admit it. And we must also have compassion for our neighbor that also has tons of imperfections. Now, does that justify when someone's committing something that is so extremely violent and horrific? It doesn't justify anything. Imperfection is not a justification. It's a reality. It's just a reality. It's not going to justify anything, but it's a reality. And until we admit that, then we can actually find a solution. We can come together and know at least that we have imperfections, that we're not always right, that we don't always know the right way, that we don't always have the right information, that we are being fooled, that we did vote for the wrong person, that we did maybe marry our abuser, right? I married my abuser. But until we can get to these places without victim blaming ourselves or victim blaming others, no change is going to happen. Just simply, and it's not going to save any lives. It's not going to save any lives. Sorry, I have to breathe for a second. To breathe for just like one second. What is everyone saying? Yeah, we're all human. And we can have dignity in our own culture and our own lineage, where we came from. I think it's actually very important. And I didn't learn until last night that I'm Greek. I'm half Greek. And my dad is Irish and Maori. And I just learned last night that there was the Greek genocide, right, of the Ottoman Empire, and 300 to 600,000 of Greek individuals died in that genocide. And so my great grandma and great grandpa came over here fleeing the genocide. And that was a huge wake up call for me, in the sense where I didn't even know that. I was so out of touch with my own lineage because of being an American. And I'm going to tell you right now, the Ottoman Empire, Turkish, Islamic, the last thing that I would ever want is for the same pain to be inflicted onto them, And even learning and seeing the images and how triggered and upset I was looking at it, it's very important for us to not continue the cycle. The cycle is what predators prey on. They know we are imperfect. They know that we are possibly easily triggered. And they push the motherfucking buttons of our triggers. They are the opposite of therapists for the most part. They will find the triggers and fucking push them. And no one gets saved in the end from that. Literally no one. And it starts with us and it ends with us. We must together end the cycle of abuse. We must end it. And the only way to end it is with ourselves. And sometimes even admitting that we are abusive ourselves. Sometimes you got to admit it. It doesn't mean you're forever a horrific individual. No. It's so much better to admit it and stop doing it than to be in shame about it and never feel like you can talk about it or get better. That's what's going to destroy us in the end, is not giving each other that safe space to be imperfect, to maybe sometimes admit that we're complicit, and sometimes maybe to admit that we're abusive. You know, we've learned sometimes things from our parents or our friends that are extremely awful. And we've picked them up and we've taken them on into our own persona. It happens. But the only way to solve this is to admit to the imperfection of us all and to remember our moral compass. And our moral compass is our humanity. Just our humanity. And seeing each other as human beings, not as fucking animals that these predators love to make us think of each other like that. Yeah, we're animals. We all are. We're mammals. But to degrade human life that way, look what's happening. Look what ends up happening when we degrade one another. You think degrading and shaming one another works? It doesn't. It never will work. It never, ever will work. And it doesn't even work. It's what parents are told. Like, I'm learning it more so even through parenting. Like, shaming doesn't work. We've thought it does for some weird reason. We think that we're going to be able to teach them a lesson, right? And the only way we teach each other a lesson is to hold space for the lesson. And how are we going to hold space for the lesson? We're going to love each other through it. We might not be best friends, or maybe we won't love each other through it, but we will respect one another through it. We must respect one another through our imperfections. And if we continue to hate one another because of it, or because of what our great ancestors did, we're going to be in a cycle of trauma. We're going to be in a cycle of violence. We're going to be in a cycle of war, and it's never going to fucking end. So we have a huge responsibility to one another to encourage and inspire one another rather than shame one another into seeing what is the truth. Can't even cry. I'm like, you can tell I'm like it's time to unlearn. Yeah, it's time to unlearn. It's time to know our responsibilities. And I think we have been such in a cycle of handing over our responsibilities to a selected few that we're losing sight of our responsibilities. And then we're defending the people we handed over it to, thinking that that's a reflection of ourselves. And it's a cycle of hell. It's a cycle of fucking hell. It's a cycle of hell. And predators enjoy this cycle of hell. They enjoy it. They make money off of it. Not only do they make money off of it, they're in like a hierarchy because of it. And we're down here and they're up there. And that's because we have handed over all of our responsibilities to them, probably because of a trauma response too, right? We don't want to have to. I mean, every time I open my phone and I'm seeing, these children, these sweet children dead, I don't want to see it. I don't think anyone wants to see it. I don't think anyone wants to see it. And they thrive off of that. They thrive off of the trauma we don't even want to engage in. The trauma that we're not ready to heal. The trauma that we don't want to face. And because of that fear, they feed off of it. And they commit horrendous crimes in our name. And instead of being mean to ourselves We need to be compassionate and cry. Feel the sorrow of the fact that we aren't necessarily always able to face the traumas that we know we should. And that's what makes us human. That's not what makes us bad. It's what makes us human. We don't need to be blamed for that. We just need to encourage that each other recognize that. And when we see the people that we have put into positions of power acting out of our ethical code, our moral compass of humanity, that we fucking check them. And we do hold the power for that. But the only way that we can is when we all collectively stand up for one another, regardless of from where, from who, doesn't matter. We are the people. We are the people. We are human beings of planet Earth. All of us. All sacred life. Every single one of us. And we must not blame the prey. We must blame the predator. And the prey should never be another person's prey. And that's what I'm seeing a lot, is seeing another person's prey, becoming another person's prey, becoming another person's prey. And now we're all arguing about it online with one another with such great privileges to be able to argue and use violent communication towards one another in the safety of our homes in Western civilization. Not a good look. And we got to admit that. It's not a good look. We got to admit it. That's not a good look. But at the same time, it's because we don't want to look at what we've all participated in, whether we like it or not. Whether we like it or not, we participated in it. So we would rather argue with one another, which the predator loves, and try to make ourselves sound super right, X, Y, and Z, than connect with one another to take down the predator. And there's the trap. There's the trap once again. Who truly value human rights. Every single human matters and deserves safety. Yeah, and like in America, we're stuck in the Dem, Republican mode, two-party situation. And it's like, there's a lot of work for us to do. And this is for another live. This is not for today. But like, we have a lot of work to do collectively. We gotta recognize that. We gotta recognize the responsibilities that we all have instead of trying to numb them away with an argument with someone online. It's not gonna numb away our responsibilities, our collective responsibilities. It ain't gonna do it. Liking a post that's what we think is in our moral compass is not gonna numb it away. We need to get very real with ourselves and understand that division is the only obstacle towards solutions. Division is the only obstacle towards solution. Of solution. I mean, it literally is. That is what it is. And we can't afford to divide. We can't afford to divide right now at all. At all. Can't. We just literally can't. We fucking literally can't. So, wow, I spoke a lot about what I actually just wanted to get off of my chest that I haven't even gotten into. I just want to actually just play this because I think it's actually very uplifting and I enjoyed it very much so. My friend Adam sent it to me and I love it a lot. So I'm actually going to pull that up right now so that we can, it's called Not in Our Name, and it's called The Pledge of Resistance. So let's listen to it.
The greatest Americans have not been born yet. They are waiting patiently for the past to die. Please give blood, George Bush. Please give blood, Ashcroft. Please give blood. Catholic priests in Boston and elsewhere. Please give blood so that the beings in waiting will find their way into the wombs of warrior women. Not in our name, the pledge to resist. We believe that as a people living in the United States, it is our responsibility to resist the injustices done by our government in our names. Not in our name will you wage endless war. There can be no more deaths, no more transfusions of blood for oil. Not in our name will you invade countries, bomb civilians, kill more children, letting history take its course over the graves of the nameless. Come attack for voicing opposition to the war or for their religion or ethnicity. We pledge to make common cause with the people of the world to bring about justice, freedom, and peace. Another world is possible, and we pledge to make it real.
Sorry, that's like just so inspiring. Not only is another world possible, but we can make it real, right? We can make it real. And we can only make it real together. Oh, wait, isn't a YouTube video playing? God, and then an ad. We don't need an ad. Enough capitalism. Enough capitalism. But not only is it possible, we can make it real. And we have to be very careful of falling into the traps of what makes it impossible, right? Or what makes it complex. Or what makes it complicated. It's just muddying the waters so that the solution always seems so far away. And the solution is actually just a handhold away. And it's not to be ridiculously optimistic about it, but at the same time, do we really have any other hope there? Has all the other tactics worked? No, they haven't. Just creates more and more division. And so I do want to remind everyone that today, this is a fundraiser that's ongoing for the children of Palestine. We've donated over $500 thus far, and I want to thank every single person who has donated even $1. I mean, we have to put action into our words. We have to. And I feel like this is a very, oh, Jacob, thanks for donating $5. I see you, Jacob. We gotta put our words into action. And we gotta show that we're better together. I mean, Mariah, thank you so much. Oh, I'm glad that people are starting to also realize that it's still a fundraiser. Yeah, I wasn't able to talk about anything this week other than this. And I think it's just more important to have this fundraiser going and to show that we're better together. And, you know, every dollar counts. I know that I was able to, you know, raise, I think it was like almost $6,000 about Brandon Quinn. And come on, like, we can do this. We can care about the things that maybe seem so far away. But I feel it in my nervous system. Even being in LA, I can't stop crying, can't stop mourning, I can't stop grieving, I can't stop feeling anger, all the emotions. Shawnee, thank you so much. $20. Thank you so much, Shawnee. And that's why I like kind of being on here sometimes, is being able to be human and show my anger and my sadness and make myself feel like it's okay. And I can only hope that my daughter and my son get to see that it's okay to feel all of the whole spectrum of being human. And it is a great responsibility, though, what we do with our human emotions. Our emotions come with great responsibility. And if we can at least show one another that we can feel all of these emotions, we can even show them, but that we have learned that we don't inflict harm onto others because of it. Wow. That's going to be such a beautiful world that we could possibly live in together, is allowing space for us to hold all of the emotions and not shaming one another out of it. And God, I had so many things planned to talk to you guys about when it comes to, you know, everything. And I do want to just say one other thing that I saw in Faria's article on Substack. I don't know if anyone follows her on Instagram, but she said a really amazing sentence and statement, which is, no death is good. Nobody's death is good. And I'm going to say it again. No death is good. Nobody's death is good. And that is something that we should be reminding one another about, is that. And also being extremely conscious of misinformation and propaganda. And we are living during a time where we are seeing all of this in real time. And I think we read, you know, history books, etc., and we constantly think it happened a long time ago, right? And that it doesn't happen anymore. It happens every time. Predators don't have other rule books. It's the same rule book over and over again. They don't have anything else. All they do is use the same tactics over and over and over again. That's what they do. And so it is our responsibility, and we must take on our responsibilities and be wrong sometimes, but take it on to educate ourselves, look into every single thing we read, hear, etc. Do our due diligence to make sure we're looking into it, and then check into our moral compass and make sure that we are not reacting out of sometimes fear, trauma, PTSD, etc. Not that those things are wrong and that we shouldn't feel those things or to exercise them, but we must not just act on them, right? I think we can do that. I actually have faith in humanity. I actually, we can't deny our emotions without compromising our capacity to feel the humanness of other people when they are harmed. Emotional awareness opens up our freedom to change the world. That's right, Christian. That's right. Emotional awareness opens up our freedom to change the world. That's beautiful. And wow, is that fucking true? It's so fucking true. Remember, everybody in the chat, be respectful towards one another. So I wanted to read a few things. What was it? This actually, I want to see if it's this YouTube video. I don't know if anyone's read Noam Chomsky or watched any videos of Noam Chomsky, but here's a little 2-minute clip about why does the U.S. support Israel, and I think it's an important watch. So let's just watch it really quickly. Oh wait, sorry guys.
Why does the United States support Israel? Well, there's a history, and a very interesting one. It actually goes back a long time. One thing to remember is that Christian Zionism is a very powerful force, which goes back long before Jewish Zionism. In England, particularly, Christian Zionism was a powerful force among British elites. It's part of the motivation for the Balfour Declaration and for Britain's support for Jewish colonization of Israel. Remember, the Bible said, and that's a big part of British elite culture. Same in the United States. Woodrow Wilson was a devout Christian who read the Bible every day. So did Harry Truman. In the Roosevelt administration, one of the leading officials, Harold Ickes, once described the return of the Jews to Palestine as the greatest event in history. It's realizing the...
I can't turn up the desktop audio. Do I need to turn up something else, Adam? Wait, what's happening? Miko is saying that, can I turn up the desktop audio? But where do I do that? Is that in OBS? Oh, desktop audio. Yeah, I can. Here. I think I can. Here.
The Bible.
Can you guys hear it
These are
better?
Deeply religious countries in which the biblical commands, so-called, are taken quite literally. Also, this is just part of colonization. This is the last phase of European colonization. And notice that the countries that are most strongly in support of Israel are not just the United States. It's the United States, Australia, and Canada, the offshoots of England, Anglosphere sometimes called, unusual forms of imperialism. These are settler colonial societies, societies in which not like India, not like the British in India, say, societies, South Africa was a little like this, or Algeria under the French, settler colonial societies in which the settlers came in, essentially eliminated the native population, also driven...
Is a colonizer a predator? I mean, that's something that we also have to ask ourselves. Does a colonizer follow the same rule book as a predator?
By religious principles, very religious groups driven by Christian Zionism. Those are major cultural factors. There are also significant geostrategic factors. You go back to 1948, there was actually a split between the State Department and the Pentagon in the United States over how to react to the new state of Israel. The State Department was not committed strongly to Israeli conquests, the establishment of the state, and was concerned about the refugees. It wanted an implementation of the refugee problem. The Pentagon, on the other hand, was very impressed with Israel's military potential. The Israeli military successes, if you look back at the internal record and declassified, the Joint Chiefs of Staff described Israel as the second largest military force in the region after Turkey and a potential base for U.S. power in the region. That continued. Can't run through the whole record, but in 1958, when there was a serious crisis in the region, Israel was the only state that strongly cooperated with Britain and the United States, and it won plenty of support from the governments and the military for that reason. 1967 is when the current relations with Israel were pretty much established. Israel performed a major service to the United States by destroying a secular Arab nationalism, a major enemy of the United States, and supporting radical Islam, which the U.S. supported. And it continues.
U.S. supported radical Islam.
Present. Right now, we saw an example of that just during the...
They destroyed secular. Just want to make sure I say that. Just make sure everyone heard that.
Gaza, that latest Gaza attack. You recall that at one point, Israel began to run out of munitions during the assault, despite the fact that it's armed to the teeth. The United States provided Israel with additional munitions through the Pentagon. And notice where they were taken from. These were U.S. munitions pre-positioned in Israel for eventual use by U.S. forces. One of many signs of how Israel is regarded as essentially a military offshoot of the United States. Very close intelligence relations that go way back, many other connections. And the media tend to take up, to support the policy of the government with
Media.
very few, kind of little questioning around the edges, but basically accept the policy. So, for example, take another issue. Take the U.S. invasion of Iraq. You cannot find the phrase U.S. invasion of Iraq in the U.S. media, though it was obviously an invasion, a blatant act of aggression, a textbook case of that's Nuremberg trials called the supreme international crime, cannot be mentioned. President Obama is praised as an opponent of the invasion. And what did he say? He said it's a mistake. It's a strategic blunder. We're not going to get away with it. That's the kind of opposition that you heard from the German general staff during Hitler's invasion of Russia. It's a blunder. Shouldn't do it. Should knock off England first. That's regarded as opposition. Same in Vietnam. There's now a commemoration underway, big commemoration of U.S. sacrifices in Vietnam. Try to find the phrase U.S. invasion of South Vietnam there or anywhere in the past year since 1961 when it took place. Non-existent, maybe on Democracy Now, what I write, but way out at the fringe. And this is not unique to the United States. Take, say, Britain. Right now there's interesting debates in the British literary journals, like the Times Literary Supplement.
Yeah, it's like, where did this all begin? Oh, yeah, Britain? Oh, yeah, and then who's following in the footsteps? U.S., right? Right? And as American people, we have to acknowledge and face the ways in which the small selected few individuals that we put into positions of power don't necessarily reflect maybe our personal moral compasses, right? And we shouldn't be defensive for them. I mean, this is so important. Like, I just got a message right now while I was live right now. I just saw someone DM me saying, I don't hear Israelis screaming out genocide. I don't think Israelis are screaming out genocide. And this is what we have to be careful of doing, is doing our bidding on behalf of the predator in a position of power. We have to be extremely careful about this. And I know for my own traumatic past that I defended my abuser so many times, right? I think every survivor can admit or recognize that we have been in positions because we were so conditioned and brainwashed by them that certain things that they didn't make them a bad person, right? And to protect their wrongdoings almost, but like subliminally. And we're seeing that now. You don't need to fight for or defend the wrongdoings of your government and make it that it's about you. Instead, what would be the right move to make is to recognize that these individuals are not honoring your ethics, your moral compass as a people, and call them out for it. But I think, again, we're just so afraid to admit, or face or recognize that, we were complicit in something. We were a part of something that we don't agree with or we don't want. Because all I keep hearing from the Israeli people, which my husband has family there, is that either they're defending, the IDF and that's a whole other story, or they're trying to defend the wrongdoings, right? By saying, pointing over here, pointing over there, making everyone look over there. Because they don't want to point in here. This is the hardest thing to do. This is the hardest thing to do. Is going, I now hold the responsibilities to not right this wrong, but to do something about this wrong and to speak out about this wrong. And it's very, very courageous to do so. And it is very hard to do so. And I'm not downplaying that. I know how fucking hard it is to do. I know. It's very hard to do. But it's so important. We have to recognize that first before that. I'm getting messages as I'm literally live. But it's so important for us to remember our humanity and not get so caught up in our predator, right? And I think civilians can be caught up in their predators as well, in the government. And I think governments can be extremely predatory. They for the most part throughout history have predatory behaviors that have been documented throughout history, and we see it time and time again. And they use civilians to vote them in, to prey on their fear of a very vague but somewhat specific enemy, to have a reason to go and do a war crime against. A war crime. A legit war crime. And they prey off of our fear. And the fear is not, I'm not saying the fear is not real, by the way. The fear could be very, very real and a legitimate fear. But they prey off of that fear. And do they make the circumstance better? No. They don't make the circumstance better. They actually want to make it worse so that they continue to profit off of it. They continue to profit off of it, and they continue to brainwash and indoctrinate generation after generation into a constant cycle of war, of trauma, of pain, and loss of innocent lives. And they don't care. They don't care. They don't care at all. That's what they do. That's what they're taught to do. And sometimes it's what their PTSD has taught them to do. And we know with BB that his brother was murdered in the way in which he might feel now that it's justifiable to do what he's doing. And no, it's not. It's not at all, actually. It's not at all. But I'm sure he has used that as a sympathy card or a way in which he can get other people on board with his triggers. And that's why it's so important as survivors that we're not caught into a cycle of just acting on our triggers. Our triggers are valid. It's not that they're not. But once we use our triggers to justify harming others, we have lost our way. We have lost our way. There's no excuse after that. It is on us. It is on us to break the cycle. It is on us to break the cycle of our American government, for example. It is on us. We can't sit here, point fingers at X, Y, and Z. No, it starts and ends with us. We are the only way forward. And the only way forward is together. We can't do it any other way. I don't even want to show anything that I pulled up today because I actually don't think it's necessarily what we need to watch. I think we actually need to come together and recognize predatory behavior and understand how predators exploit the people, exploit civilians, and try to rationalize and justify their actions. And is a colonizer a predator? Yes. Yes, a colonizer is a predator. That is exactly what it is. They go hand in hand. They go hand in hand. A colonizer is a predator. And being on colonized land which is, for example, where I live in America, this is stolen land. My family, settlers. We live on stolen land. And do I feel guilty? Abso-fucking-lutely. And would I give land back? In a fucking heartbeat. In a fucking heartbeat. I know it's the right thing to do. And I wouldn't argue and I wouldn't try to justify how, I came here because I'm Greek and my grandma came here from a genocide, and all of those things are real and truth, but would I give it back? In a fucking heartbeat. Because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And it's a hard thing to do because you want to protect yourself against the wrongdoings of what has happened in the past and who you have voted into positions of power. You think you're protecting them because you think you're protecting yourself. They want you to think almost like it's intertwined, right? That what they're doing is you and you are them. And we must not get this mistaken. We are not them. We are not them. We are not intertwined into them. And even if we are, for example, it's time to detangle, untangle our connection with them when we see that they're doing something that is not morally sound. How is everyone feeling? How is everyone doing? And Netanyahu and Joe Biden, I don't like them that much. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I don't want anything to do with either of them. And you know what? I voted for Joe Biden. I voted for Joe Biden because I felt the need to in a time where, we all remember, I don't need to go into details about it. He was the lesser of both evils, however you want to put it. But do I like Joe Biden? No. Did he get accused of SH in the past? Yes. And these are the circumstances that we are in. And they're horrible. But am I going to be defensive? No. I'll admit it. I voted for Joe Biden. And do I agree with him? No. So both can happen. Both can exist. And we must allow ourselves to condemn, the individuals that we have put into positions of power and check their privilege at the door and check them when we see them. Because honestly, they rely on us. They rely on the collective that puts them into a position of power. They rely on us. And we must not forget our power. We can never forget our power. We must constantly remind one another of our power together, not individually, not alone, together. Together, we are their greatest enemy. For the predators I'm talking about. When we come together, watch out, Yeah, I was going to go into a bunch of stuff, but I really don't even think I'm going to look through my tabs here. I guess another important thing to mention here is just as a reminder of, the climate impact of war. 7 years left to cut carbon emissions by 50% before climate damage to the planet is irreversible. War accelerates this already limited time frame. Environmental costs of war activities such as bombings, explosions, chemical warfare, flaring, increased industrialization, destruction of buildings and infrastructure, human displacement, and military presence cause environmental damage, including deforestation, land and water and air pollution, increased levels of CO2 and methane, soil degradation from military scrap and explosive remnants, destruction of wildfire. The Iraq War alone is said to have generated 141 million tons of CO2 in 4 years, the equivalent of 25 million extra car exhausts being emitted over a whole year. Human costs of war, similar to the climate crisis, war affects the youngest half of the population and robs everyone of the future. In 2021, an average of 22 children per day per year are killed or injured in conflicts worldwide. Adolescent girls are more vulnerable to abuse and exploitation during times of violent conflict. As of 2019, approx 426 million children live in a conflict-affected area, and approx 160 million children live in a high-intensity conflict zone worldwide. Children represent 52% of the current Syrian refugee population. Nearly half of Gaza population is under the age of 18, with 43% of Gaza's total population of ages 0 to 14. My God. 95% of children in Gaza currently suffer from anxiety, trauma, and depression. Financial costs of war. War is expensive. Here's what we know about recent military costs. The U.S. spent $8 trillion on the wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and elsewhere. These have been borrowed funds with interest payments estimated to cost a total of $6.5 trillion by the 2050s. The U.S. Department of Defense is the world's single largest institutional consumer of oil. They spend about $20 billion a year on energy, 75% of which is on fuel. To date, the U.S. has given Israel $158 billion for missile defense funding and pledges an additional $38 billion aid through 2028. How are we meant to invest in climate positive solutions when we spend billions annually to support destructive activity? How? SWANA vulnerability factors. The climate crisis has made this, SWANA region especially vulnerable. Temperatures in Southwest Asia and North Africa are predicted to rise more than 20% higher than global averages. SWANA is the most water-scarce region in the world, though 6.3% of the world's population lives there. The region contains only 1.4% of the world's renewable fresh water. 60% of the region's population doesn't have access to potable water. Rising sea levels are set to rise 30 to 122 centimeters, 1 to 4 feet, by the end of the century. Lands are becoming more arid, leading to desertification, including desert dust, which poorly impacts air quality, health, and ecosystems, and increased wildfires. With an already ticking clock on the fate of our planet, can we really afford war? And that's another thing. So if anyone's like, a climate activist out here, which we should all be, by the way, where's the future going to be if we're not protecting the future, right? And so if we are climate environmentalists, activists, war is so extremely detrimental to the future. And we must focus on the present moment and continue to remind one another to focus on the present moment, because we are what decides the future of existence. And what are we going to teach the future? I remember reading as a kid about the Holocaust, etc., and thinking, how did these people, and so what are we going to teach our future? How have we changed? How have we learned? What have we learned? How much have we admitted to our humanity? And how much have we overthrown predators in positions of power that do not represent our ethical code, that do not represent our moral compass, and that will not protect the future of humanity? And that's Thought I was going to be talking about a lot of different shit today, but to be honest, this is what ended up coming out. And to answer the question that I put on the thumbnail, can a politician be a predator? Yes. Yes, they can. And one other thing, just to remember that predators have a tactic in the animal kingdom to attack the back of the herd. And what they do by attacking the back of the herd is that it sends a message to the entire herd, right? And we can consider ourselves sometimes a herd. We're very collective as human beings. So if one person or if an animal gets injured in the back of the herd, it will make the entire front of the herd scatter. So the whole point of the predator getting the back of the herd is to isolate the rest of the herd so that other predators can get them. And I want to say this as a reminder to all of us that when they get someone in the back of the herd, that we do not scatter, because it will leave all of us vulnerable in the end. All of us will be more vulnerable in the end, and we must stick together. Jacob, oh my God, Jacob donated another. Thank you so much, Jacob. I don't even know what we're at this point. What are we at? Does anyone? Thanks, Jacob. So let's not scatter. Let's recognize someone got injured in the back of the herd, right? Behind us. But let's not scatter. Let's learn, strategize, come together, organize. Get rid of the predator. It doesn't represent our humanity and doesn't represent our moral compass. We have to stay united. And the more we stay united, we'll never be divided. And good luck, predators, because that's all the fuck they have, man. It's all the fuck they have, and it's getting old, and we're getting used to it, and we're catching on. And so my deepest prayer is that we stay united. We do not disconnect. We do not divide. And we do not allow the predators to win. And we heal our traumas. We heal our PTSD, not by not feeling them, but by feeling them, creating safe spaces to exercise and feel all of that, but never ever inflicting harm onto another individual. That is where we prove to the predator we don't need them anymore. Not that we ever needed them, but the false sense of needing them. And then we can show them we'll take on the responsibilities. We're taking our responsibilities seriously now, and we're going to take it head on, but not in a way that harms any human life. Okay. So, God, I was going to go into everything, but I think it's actually better not to trigger anybody. I think that's how I'm feeling right now. I feel like it was just best to get this all out. And I can't say how much I appreciate this community and for listening and taking part, coming together. And there's more days to come, sadly. And we need each other the most now. We need ourselves the most and each other now. And I hope we take that as seriously as possible. And that we take care of one another. And that we encourage one another to do the right thing. To do the right thing. And thank you to everybody that donated. Again, the fundraiser is still open for the Palestinian children. We have donated so many billions of dollars to Israel. So let's please donate our funds to the Palestinian children that need us right now. And thank you for everyone for being here. Jacob, thank you for being here. And I appreciate every single one of you. And to be honest, I'm going to end the stream with the same thing I played earlier. But where are you? Wait, what? Why did I lose sight of you? Where is it? I'm like looking for it and it's nowhere. Oh, because Doja Cat. I got it. Actually, Doja Cat tried to block the way, but too bad, Doja.
The greatest Americans have not been born yet. They are waiting patiently for the past to die. Please give blood, George Bush. Please give blood, Ashcroft. Please give blood, Catholic priests in Boston and elsewhere. Please give blood so that the beings in waiting will find their way into the wombs of warrior women. Not in our name, the pledge to resist. We believe that as a people living in the United States, it is our responsibility to resist the injustices done by our government in our names. Not in our name will you wage endless war. There can be no more deaths, no more transfusions of blood for oil. Not in our name will you invade countries, bomb civilians, kill more children, letting history take its course over the graves of the nameless. Not in